Hi, I'm Father Joel, and welcome to Pilgrim Priest. I'm grateful for both my biological family and my church family, which I serve as a priest. During the holiday season, it's kind of difficult because you want to spend extra time with both your families, so I'm grateful for the opportunities I had. And thank you for tuning in today. God bless you. On the Sunday between Christmas and New Year's, the church always celebrates the feast of the Holy Family of Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. And it's perhaps a chance for us to zoom out a little bit from baby Jesus and to get a sense of the context in which God sent us our Savior. But it's also an opportunity for us to reflect on the fact that Jesus comes not just to restore humanity as individuals, but also to restore us as the community of love that is the family, the basic unit of society. And so in order for us to truly understand who we are, what we're called to be, and what salvation does, we need to understand how God intended the family to be from the beginning. Like, what was the original plan that was damaged by sin in the garden and continues to be damaged by the effects of sin and hurts and wounds in our life. So we reflect on God's original plan for the family. And I saw a real clear sense of that when I listened to the Restore the Glory podcast with Dr. Bob Schutz and Jake Kim. I find that podcast really helpful. They had a series on the 4 fundamental identities. And I thought, this could be interesting because identity is kind of a hot topic nowadays. What is my identity? And many people struggle with a loss of a sense of identity or trying to find identity in various different ways. So I thought, what are they presenting as the 4 fundamental identities? And this is what they talked about. First, the identity of being a child, that is a son or a daughter. Then the identity of being a sibling, that is a brother or sister. Then the identity of being a spouse, a husband or a wife. And the 4th is the identity of being a parent, that is a father or a mother. Those are what they see as the 4 fundamental identities: child, sibling, spouse, and parent. And when we look at these as identities, the first thing we notice is that every single one of them is relational, that there is a me and a you. There are 2 people involved. So it's not an identity that's simply rooted in me looking at me, in me telling the world who I think I am, but it's actually an identity that's reflected in a relationship. And that kind of makes sense for Christians because we think of God as a Trinity, that is a community, that the identity of Jesus flows from him being the Father's Son. And so there's a fundamental relationship within the Trinity. So it should surprise us that if we're made in the image and likeness of God, that would be true for us also, that our identities would actually be found in relationship. The second thing we notice is that the identities kind of build on each other. So obviously one can be a parent without necessarily being a spouse, but the kinds of people who make really good spouses also tend to be great parents, right? And anybody who has a good spousal relationship will say, he's my best friend, she's my best friend. Well, good. Well, then you clearly were good at friendship, at that piece of being a brother-sister in order to build that relationship. And of course, and brother and sister is actually rooted in parent, in being a child first and foremost. That's where it starts. And so that child identity becomes the foundation, the basement, the support on which those other identities are built. Also, if that identity of being a child, a son or a daughter, isn't solid, it isn't stable, that will create problems all throughout our identities. So they build on each other. And then the third thing we notice is that each identity, in order for it to be healthy, it's based on this idea that you are a gift and so am I. And that you are a gift to me and I receive you as a gift, and I am a gift to you and you receive me as a gift. So think about it when a child is born, and that child is born into a family, hopefully, people who love each other. and they welcome that child, and that child is welcomed as a gift. And because that child is a gift, that child is wanted and loved, is received, feels itself valued, protected, cared for, provided for, soothed, comforted. Parents are there to soothe and comfort that child. Heard, listened to, their cries are heard. And then the child is provided with support to grow, to become the best self possible, which is really what love is, right? Is I love you. I want what's best for you. So there's a receiving of that child as a gift. And that child experiences himself or herself as a gift, which is really important. Because then as you recognize that you're now part of a community, you have older or younger brothers and sisters, then you can receive them as a gift, as you were received. And so not only are they loved by the parents, but they're also loved by their siblings. Now, I know that sibling relationships aren't perfect, right? But then it kind of challenges us to learn what it means to love others, even when we don't like them very much, even when they are difficult. And that's a really important lesson to learn, to continue to treat my sibling as a gift, even when he doesn't feel like a gift, right? And then that relationship that enables me to welcome another someone as a gift and enter into a romantic relationship with that person, to be prepared to give myself completely to that person and receive him or her as a gift and give myself to them. And then that total self-giving, that is marriage, then prepares us to be parents, to receive life and to give to it. You'll notice how we move from mostly receiving to mostly giving, right? As a child, 90-some% of what you do is receive. The giving part comes from your parents. But then as you grow through those other relationships, there should be a kind of a mutual giving and receiving, maybe more for older siblings than for younger, and then a total self-gift in marriage, and then then you give to your kids 90-some%, right? So now you're on the giving side and they're on the receiving side. So you sort of grow in this maturity from being the receiver of the giving to being the giver. So this is what God intends. This is what marriage is meant for, but this is what the whole family unit is about. It's about building these healthy identities of who I am in relationship and how I am a gift and you are a gift and I love you and receive you, give myself to you. The problem that happens is that we can move out of that mode of giving and receiving. Remember in the garden, Adam and Eve are given everything. They're given all these trees, and yet they decide to take instead of receive. So they move from being receivers into being takers. Well, the same thing can happen in these relationships. And we see it happening most fundamentally in that relationship with parents and children. There's been a big shift. In the old days, kids just came along and you just welcomed them and you made room at the table for one more kid. Like you kind of couldn't help that, right? But then along came artificial contraception and we started using birth control like it was deodorant or electricity, Why would you live without it? And what happened as a result of that was that our mentality towards children shifted. Children moved from being a gift to be received to becoming a choice. And that fundamentally changed the relationship between parent and child. Now you might think it would change it in a good way, right? I chose to have you. I wanted you. Every child is wanted. But that's not actually the case because, people get married now and they're like, well, we're not choosing to have children right now, so you can have some grand doggies. Our dogs are like our kids, right? So we make the choice not to have kids. Or then we make the choice to have kids, but now we discover that we're struggling with infertility. So maybe I can pay someone to help me have the choice that I want, to provide me with artificial insemination or IVF, or I'll pay a surrogate to raise a baby for me and then give me the baby so I can have this choice that I really, really want. And that children begin to not experience themselves as a gift that's welcomed, but as a choice. And they hear their parents say things like, oh, I'm so glad we only had two. they're like, I could have not been here. I could have not been chosen. And so children start to think that they have to somehow earn their place. But they also start to think of their siblings as competition. Why did mom and dad choose to have more than me? And they see as though I'm competing with my siblings for the scarce resources of my parents' love and the gifts at Christmas, right? And so then my siblings aren't welcomed as a gift. My siblings are seen as competition with me. So I can't really enter into a relationship of mutual self-giving because I don't want to lose what I have. And so siblings become more a relationship of rivalry and less a relationship of mutual self-giving and respect. And then that begins to translate into marriage, where I marry someone because you are an accessory to the lifestyle that I want, because you fit my lifestyle. So instead of seeing you as a gift and giving myself, now I'm taking, now I'm receiving, now I want you because you fit what I need temporarily, right? I can always not choose you. And so then we always are on edge in our relationships and always hedging our bets. And then when it's time to have children, well, I don't want too many because I'm already competing for the scarce resource of my spouse's love and attention and time. And if there's more kids, well, then there won't be enough to go around for everyone. And so instead of an abundance where we receive the gift and we're grateful for it and we cherish the gift, now we're sort of living with a scarcity mentality. And that moves us out of healthy relationships and into competition and into grasping and into relationships that are based on fear of losing as opposed to being grateful for what I've been given. So the question is then, how does Jesus heal that, right? Or let's look at our first reading first, and we can see that mentality. We see Hannah. Hannah has a nice husband, Elkanah, but she doesn't have any kids. And Hannah deeply, deeply desires to be a mom, but she can't make that happen for herself. And so she ends up going to God, and she pours out her desires before God, and she's so upset, she's blubbering, and the priest is like, "Sober up, woman. You're making a drunken show of yourself at 9 a.m. That's embarrassing." And she's like, "I'm not drunk. I'm just really upset, and now you hurt my feelings." And the priest is like, "Sorry. God bless you, and I'll pray for you. I'm sure God will take care of you." Well, she promises God that if he gives her the gift of a child, she'll give that child back to God. And sure enough, the next year, she has this little baby, the gift of Samuel. And she receives him as a gift, but she realizes she's made this promise, she needs to give him back. And so when he's old enough, she actually gives him back to the temple, and he ends up becoming the great prophet that is Samuel. Now, he still has a relationship with his parents. They visit him every year, and she has more kids after him, and she makes him a little garment every year and brings him a new garment size. So kind of like the altar server robe, she makes one for him. So clearly he lives in his mom's love, but there's this sense that she wants to receive him as a gift, but she can't make that happen, right? So she trusts in God, she receives the gift, and then she gives that gift of her child back to God. Well, this is how Jesus is received. He's a gift, and he wants to transform our sense of what it means to be children. And that's where it's key. Remember, the foundation is that sense of being a son or a daughter. But what if my parents aren't great parents? What if my experience of being a son or daughter wasn't great? Am I doomed forever? No, because our second reading tells us that we have been adopted as God's children, that God has put his Spirit into our hearts, that Jesus comes to reveal to us our true identity. And so in order to reveal to us our true identity, he has to restore us to true relationships, right? Because identity flows from relationship. And so what Jesus wants to reveal to us is our fundamental relationship is with God the Father. And then Jesus gives us this new gift of his mom to be our mom. So Mary becomes the mother of all Christians. And that means that our primary parents, our true spiritual parents, are God the Father and Mary our mother. And we shouldn't think of them like backup parents, like, well, if my parents weren't good enough, well, then I always have Mary to fall back on. No, what we should think of is that our earthly parents are beautiful but imperfect reflections of heavenly fatherhood and motherhood. Just like Joseph reflects the fatherhood of God as long as he can, and then eventually Jesus realizes that his true father is God. So that should be the case for every child, that our parents reflect the fatherhood of God, the motherhood of Mary, for as long as they're able to, until we begin to realize that God is truly my Father. And when we can, when we make that shift, then we find a deeper foundation, a deeper place to form our identities. And from that place of true unconditional love, of being loved as a child of God, then I can be a better sibling. I can be a better friend, a better teammate, a better coworker, because I know that I'm loved, and so I can love you and not have to see you as competition. And then from that place, then marriages can be healthier, because since I'm living in my true identity as a beloved child of God, then I can see you as a beloved child of God, and incredibly grateful that God would bless me with the gift of you. And I can't believe what a gift I've been given. And so a marriage can become this giving and receiving. And then parenthood is about reflecting the love of God to children. And so instead of trying not to ruin the kids, now the goal becomes to, as much as possible, reflect to children that love of God. So being rooted in God's fatherhood and receiving that sonship is really important. I think for many people there are some big obstacles to that, and the biggest obstacle is, well, frankly, men. Men tend not to be great dads all of the time, unfortunately, and so maybe my father was pretty domineering and controlling, and I didn't really feel loved. I felt like it was conditional love. Or maybe dad was absent. He wasn't really present. Either emotionally or even physically, he wasn't there. And so maybe I don't like calling God Father because that brings up some wounds. God as a mother is safer for me, or just God as a heavenly gender-neutral parent would be great. But we need to remember that the early church was preaching the gospel in the Roman world, and for Romans, the father, the pater familias, was really more of the head of a small home business than he was a loving father. Roman fathers tended to be both domineering and absent. And so Christians saw this as an opportunity not to give up on the fatherhood of God, but to say, hey, let's learn how God is a father, and from that, let's teach men how to be fathers like God is Father. So Christians brought the unconditional love of God and the presence, God's ongoing presence in our life, into the family, and it transformed family relationships. And I think we need to continue to do that, is to learn from the Father, God the Father, what it means to be a true father. Last thing I'll say is next week we'll celebrate Mary, the Mother of God, and we have to remember that our human relationships start with that relationship with our mother, right? That we are conceived in our mother's womb. We are literally plugged into our mom, and so much so that even after we're born, we still have the memory, right? We carry our belly button where we used to be connected to mom and where her life used to flow into us. And it makes sense then that our re-establishment of healthy spiritual relationships would actually start not with God, the Father, nor with Jesus, but actually with Mary. That Mary would be the relationship that we needed to grow in first. So I want to encourage you to start a relationship with Mary if you don't have one already. A daily rosary is a really great habit. But also I'd encourage you to call your mom every day. And by that I mean speaking to Mary. Some of you have great moms and you talk to her daily, and you can also talk to Mary each day. Some of us have lost our moms. Some folks have lost their moms and can't chat with mom like you used to. Well, Mother Mary is more than happy to listen. And some moms aren't great listeners, and maybe you don't share a lot with mom because she's not a great listener. But Mary is. In fact, she'll never interrupt you. So I want to encourage you to develop a relationship with our Mother Mary. Mary will introduce us to Jesus, and Jesus introduces us to God the Father. And so it's really important that we start or deepen a relationship that we have with Mary. So with this coming feast day of Mary, the Mother of God, for January 1st, it's a great time to make a new commitment, to begin to develop a true identity as being a son or daughter of the Blessed Virgin Mary, and to begin to root our identity in something deeper than our earthly experiences of family. And I think we'll find that as we become more deeply rooted, that transforms everything. We begin to see ourselves as we truly are, beloved children of God our Father and Mary our Mother. I'm not sure if I love eggnog or not. You could call me agnostic.